stuff for a moment. Not the kind of pause that lasts a second before your attention drifts somewhere else, but the kind that pulls you completely into the present. The kind that makes you aware of your own thoughts, your own breathing, and the strange feeling that something important is unfolding right now. There is a reason this message found you at this exact point in your journey. There is a reason your attention landed here when it could have been scattered across countless other distractions, competing for your focus. Most people move through their days without noticing the subtle forces shaping their decisions. They rush from one obligation to the next, responding to noise without ever asking what is quietly calling them beneath it. Yet somehow, out of all the directions you could have taken, you arrived here. And if there is a small voice inside you that feels unusually alert, if there is a sensation you cannot fully explain, as though these words are reaching a place deeper than ordinary curiosity, then pay attention to that feeling. It matters more than you realize. What you are experiencing is not merely interest, it is recognition. It is the moment when something inside you responds before logic has a chance to catch up. Many people spend their entire lives ignoring these moments. They dismiss them as coincidence. They convince themselves that every meaningful encounter is accidental. But there are certain points in life when the invisible patterns beneath reality become impossible to ignore. There are moments when you feel as though something is trying to get your attention, not through force but through repetition, through instinct, through an inner knowing that refuses to disappear. This is one of those moments. Before we move deeper into the significance of June 10th, there is something you need to understand. This date is not isolated from the path that brought you here. It is connected to everything that has been unfolding beneath the surface. It is connected to the emotions you have struggled to explain, the questions that keep returning to your mind, and the growing awareness that the life you once accepted without question is beginning to feel different. June 10th is not simply another square on a calendar. It feels more like a threshold, a point where awareness and choice meet, a moment when life seems to pause just long enough to ask whether you are truly paying attention. And that question matters, because opportunities for transformation rarely announce themselves loudly. They often arrive quietly. They appear disguised as intuition, as discomfort, as a sudden realization that you can no longer continue living the way you once did. If you ignore those signals, nothing dramatic may happen immediately. There may be no visible consequence. Yet over time, you begin to feel the distance growing between the person you are and the person you are capable of becoming, not because you were punished, but because you walked past a doorway that was waiting for your response. So before we continue, make a conscious decision to be present. Engage with this moment intentionally. Let your actions reflect your awareness, not because of routine, not because someone told you to, but because there is power in declaring that you are here fully and willingly. What follows is not meant to be consumed passively. It is meant to be felt, reflected upon, and recognized. Most people never fully understand how significant certain moments can be until long after they have passed. They assume that life changes suddenly, that transformation begins with a dramatic event, a single decision, or an obvious turning point. But genuine change rarely works that way. Long before a breakthrough becomes visible, something begins shifting internally. The process starts beneath the surface where nobody can see it. It starts in the quiet places of your mind and spirit. Think about the past several days, perhaps even the past several weeks. If you're honest with yourself, you may recognize that something has already been changing. Maybe you have felt unusually restless. Maybe there has been an emotional intensity that appeared without a clear cause. Maybe people's situations or routines that once felt familiar have started feeling strangely out of alignment. You may have found yourself questioning relationships you never questioned before. You may have felt drawn away from habits that once seemed comfortable. You may have experienced moments when you simply knew something was ending, even if you could not yet explain what was beginning. Many people mistake these experiences for confusion. They assume something is wrong because certainty is disappearing. In reality, these feelings often emerge when preparation is taking place. Before a new chapter can begin, the old one must loosen its grip. Before greater clarity arrives, the structures that no longer serve you begin to feel unstable. That discomfort is not necessarily a sign that you are lost. It can be evidence that you are being repositioned. The energy surrounding your life has likely been shifting for longer than you realize. The signs are subtle enough that they can be dismissed if you are distracted. A thought appears and lingers longer than expected. A dream leaves an emotional imprint that follows you throughout the day. A conversation feels unusually significant. A feeling emerges without explanation and refuses to leave. These experiences seem unrelated when viewed individually, yet when observed together, they begin forming a pattern. You may even have noticed changes in the way time feels. Certain days seem unusually heavy, as though every hour carries more weight than normal. Certain moments seem stretched, forcing you to become more aware of what is happening inside you. These experiences are easy to overlook, but they often signal that something deeper is taking place. It is as though your awareness is being expanded beyond its usual boundaries, preparing you to recognize something that was previously hidden from view. When an important turning point approaches, reality often begins revealing itself differently. People show sides of themselves that were previously concealed. Circumstances unfold with a precision that feels difficult to explain. Doors open unexpectedly and then close just as quickly, forcing you to ask whether you are truly paying attention. Patterns begin emerging where randomness once seemed to exist. The challenge is that these patterns are only visible to those who are present enough to notice them. That is why awareness matters so much right now, because if your attention remains trapped in distraction, you may miss the deeper meaning hidden within ordinary events. But if you remain conscious, observant, and willing to listen, you will start noticing something remarkable. You will begin to see connections where none seemed to exist before. You'll recognize an invisible current moving beneath the surface of your daily life, and that current appears to be guiding everything toward the same destination, toward June 10th, not as a random date, not as an isolated event, but as the point where many smaller shifts converge into something impossible to ignore. There are countless days that pass through your life without leaving a lasting imprint. Yet there are other days that seem to gather significance long before they arrive, days that pull together lessons, emotions, realizations, and choices into a single defining moment. And as this date draws closer, the feeling becomes stronger that something meaningful has been unfolding all along, preparing you to recognize what comes next. There are moments that pass through your life unnoticed, blending into the background of memory until they become impossible to distinguish from the thousands of other ordinary days that came before them. Then there are rare moments that seem almost invisible while they are happening, yet later become the dividing line between who you were and who you became. June 10th belongs to that second category. Its significance is not found in dramatic appearances or obvious announcements. Its power exists beneath the surface, hidden within the unfolding of events that may seem completely ordinary at first glance. Yet beneath that ordinary appearance, something extraordinary is gathering momentum. What makes a day like this different is not the date itself. It is the convergence taking place around it. Imagine every experience you have lived through, every lesson that challenged you, every decision that moved you forward or held you back, slowly flowing toward a single point. The doubts you entertained, the opportunities you embraced, the moments you followed your inner knowing, and the moments you ignored it, all of them become part of the same current. By the time June 10th arrives, those currents meet. They do not erase the past, nor do they guarantee the future. Instead, they reveal something. They bring into focus a truth that has been forming quietly for much longer than you realize. This is where many people become confused. They imagine that transformative moments announce themselves clearly. They believe life-changing opportunities arrive with certainty, instructions, and undeniable proof. But the most powerful turning points rarely operate that way. They do not ask for intellectual preparation. They do not reward perfect planning. They do not wait until you feel completely ready. Instead, they ask something far more difficult. They ask whether you trust the deeper wisdom inside yourself when it conflicts with familiar logic. That is why this moment matters. Because when June 10th unfolds, the defining factor will not be what happens around you. The defining factor will be how you respond to what happens within you. There may be no dramatic event, no unmistakable sign, no grand declaration. Instead, there may be a subtle feeling, a realization, a choice that appears small enough to dismiss, yet hidden inside that seemingly insignificant experience will be the potential to redirect everything that follows. The shift itself may be almost invisible. The consequences, however, may echo for years. The challenge is that these moments rarely look important while they are happening. They arrive dressed as ordinary circumstances. They blend into the routine of everyday life, and because of that, most people fail to recognize them. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they are incapable. They miss them because their attention is elsewhere. They are distracted. They are rushing. They are operating from habit rather than awareness. They move through the day on autopilot, reacting instead of observing. They choose what feels familiar because familiarity provides comfort. They reach for distractions because distractions require less courage than transformation. And when intuition quietly attempts to guide them toward a different direction, they dismiss it in favor of what feels predictable. The unsettling truth is that when this happens, they rarely realize what they have lost. Life continues. Everything appears normal. Yet beneath the surface, something has changed. The opportunity does not vanish completely, but the timeline shifts. The doorway moves. The path remains available, but it no longer stands directly in front of them. And months, or even years later, they find themselves wondering why something feels incomplete. They sense a gap they cannot explain. They feel disconnected from a possibility they once almost touched. What they fail to recognize is that the moment they were waiting for had already arrived and quietly passed by while their attention was somewhere else. If you reflect honestly on your own journey, you may recognize that this is not the first time life has presented such a moment. Think back. There have been occasions when something deep inside urged you to act. A feeling appeared that could not be explained logically. A part of you knew it was time to speak, time to leave, time to begin, or time to let go. The voice was not loud. It did not force you. It simply remained present, waiting for your response. Sometimes you ignored it. You told yourself you needed more certainty. You convinced yourself that the timing was wrong. You waited for clearer evidence. You searched for guarantees that never arrived. And other times, despite your fear, you listened. You took the step. You trusted the feeling. You moved forward without fully understanding why. When you look back now, those decisions often became the moments that changed everything. Not because you understood them at the time, but because you responded to something deeper than fear. Those experiences were not random events scattered throughout your life. They were training. They were preparation. They were teaching you how to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of alignment. They were strengthening your ability to recognize what is real beneath the noise of uncertainty. The universe rarely presents its most significant lessons all at once. Instead, it builds awareness gradually. One experience leads to another. One realization prepares you for the next. Layer after layer, your perception evolves, and eventually a moment arrives carrying more weight than the ones that came before it. That is why this approaching threshold feels different, because something inside you already recognizes it. As you listen to these words, there may be a part of you responding quietly, not through excitement, not through dramatic emotion, but through recognition, a subtle knowing, a feeling that something long ignored is trying to be acknowledged. That presence has always been there. It appears during moments of silence. It emerges between thoughts. It surfaces whenever your life drifts too far away from what truly matters. It is the feeling that tells you a situation no longer fits. It is the awareness that reminds you that you have settled for less than what your spirit desires. It is the realization that certain chapters have already ended, even if you have not yet closed the door. For a long time, you may have questioned whether that voice was real. You may have wondered whether it was simply imagination. You may have doubted yourself every time it appeared. But there comes a point when doubt can no longer suppress what your soul already knows. And that is why June 10th carries such significance. The hesitation that once felt manageable begins to lose its power. The signal becomes stronger. The message becomes clearer. The truth becomes harder to avoid. Soon the question will no longer be whether you can hear that inner guidance. The question will become whether you are willing to honor it. Do not expect this realization to arrive with spectacle. Do not look toward the sky waiting for a sign that leaves no room for interpretation. That is not how awareness operates. The defining moment may arrive hidden within a conversation. It may emerge through a decision. It may appear as an unexpected opportunity. It may come through a message, a realization, or an emotion that rises without warning. On the surface, it may look completely ordinary. Yet beneath the surface, everything will feel different. The energy surrounding it will carry a strange intensity, a feeling that reality itself has paused and is waiting for your response. If your mind is consumed by distractions, you may overlook it. If you are rushing through life, you may miss it. But if you are present, if you are grounded, if you are listening beyond appearances, you will recognize that something larger is unfolding. And when that moment arrives, life will narrow into a single question. Will you choose fear or will you choose alignment? Fear will sound convincing. It will offer logical explanations. It will encourage delay. It will promise safety. It will suggest that tomorrow is a better day. It will persuade you that waiting is wiser than acting. Alignment will feel entirely different. It may carry uncertainty. It may challenge your comfort. It may require courage. Yet beneath that discomfort will exist a quiet certainty that cannot be manufactured by the mind. A deep knowing, a recognition, a truth, and that choice, no matter how small it appears, will become the foundation upon which everything that follows is built. Because every major transformation begins with a decision that seemed insignificant when it was made. As June 10th approaches, that decision is moving closer, and the intensity you feel is not evidence that something is wrong. It is evidence that something important is near. Fear always grows louder when expansion becomes possible. It becomes strongest when you stand at the edge of a new version of yourself. It argues for sameness because sameness feels safe. It disguises itself as responsibility, practicality, and caution. But beneath its arguments is another truth waiting patiently to be heard. The truth that remaining where you are is no longer enough. The truth that you have outgrown parts of your current reality. The truth that the future calling you forward is stronger than the comfort trying to hold you back. And that tension, that powerful pull between the person you have been and the person you are becoming, is not a warning. It is confirmation that you are standing in front of something far more important than you can currently see. Because the purpose of these moments has never been comfort. Their purpose is transformation, and what comes next will reveal exactly how ready you are to embrace it. The truth that few people are willing to accept is that genuine expansion rarely arrives wrapped in comfort. It does not appear as certainty. It does not arrive carrying guarantees. More often, it feels like standing at the edge of unfamiliar territory while every instinct conditioned by your past urges you to remain where you are. Growth has a way of unsettling the structures that once made you feel secure. It questions assumptions you have carried for years. It challenges the identity you have built around familiar routines and predictable outcomes. That is why the energy surrounding June 10th is so significant. This moment is not designed to preserve the version of life you have already mastered. It is designed to expose the version of yourself waiting beyond it. Many people approach important turning points hoping they will feel easy. They search for reassurance that the next step will be comfortable before they are willing to take it. Yet, the deeper purpose of moments like this is not comfort. Their purpose is revelation. They illuminate possibilities that cannot be discovered while remaining inside old patterns. They invite movement beyond habits that once provided safety but now create limitation. If you enter this period expecting everything to feel smooth and familiar, you may completely overlook the opportunity hidden within it. But if you approach it with curiosity, awareness, and a willingness to trust what is unfolding, even when you do not fully understand it, the meaning behind this day begins to reveal itself. As the energy builds, the signals surrounding you may become impossible to ignore. You may begin noticing strange repetitions appearing throughout your daily life. Certain ideas seem to follow you wherever you go. A message appears in one place, then appears again through a different person, a different conversation, or an entirely unrelated experience. Thoughts that once felt scattered begin connecting into a larger picture. Questions that have lingered unanswered for months may suddenly feel clearer. It can feel almost as if reality itself is arranging pieces into place, guiding your attention towards something important. Do not dismiss these experiences too quickly. The human mind is often trained to explain everything away. It prefers certainty and predictable explanations. Yet there are periods when life communicates through patterns rather than direct instructions. Guidance does not always arrive as a loud announcement. Sometimes it appears through repetition. Sometimes it emerges through a growing sense that events are carrying a deeper meaning than they seem to possess on the surface. Pay attention to the people entering your life during this period. Notice the conversations that linger in your mind long after they end. Observe the emotions that arise unexpectedly. Even experiences that appear small may contain valuable information. The closer you move toward this threshold, the more interconnected everything may begin to feel. What once seemed unrelated starts forming a coherent pattern. Events begin pointing toward a common center, and whether you recognize it consciously or not, that center is the moment you are approaching. One of the most important things to understand is that guidance is rarely absent. Most of the time, it is present. The challenge is whether you are attentive enough to recognize it. Life often surrounds you with signals long before a major shift arrives. The problem is that many people brush them aside. They label them coincidence. They ignore them because they do not fit neatly into their expectations, and every time they dismiss those signals, they weaken their relationship with their own awareness. The opposite is also true. Every time you acknowledge a pattern, every time you honor an intuitive feeling, every time you allow yourself to remain open to deeper meaning, you strengthen that connection. You become more capable of recognizing what is unfolding around you. You become more present, and presence is everything right now. Because while one part of you is becoming more aware, another force may begin pulling in the opposite direction. You may notice an increasing desire to stay busy, a stronger urge to fill every quiet moment with stimulation, scrolling, entertainment, constant activity, anything that prevents you from sitting alone with your own thoughts. This is not unusual. In fact, it is often one of the clearest signs that something important is approaching. Distraction has always been one of the easiest ways to avoid awareness. When your attention is constantly occupied, you never have to confront what is happening beneath the surface. You never have to hear the quiet truths trying to emerge. You never have to face the uncomfortable realizations that transformation often requires. That is why so many people overlook their most important opportunities. Not because those opportunities never arrived, not because they were unworthy, but because their attention was elsewhere when the moment appeared. The invitation was there. The doorway was open, yet they were too distracted to notice. This is why stillness matters now more than ever. Create moments where you can hear yourself clearly. Allow silence to exist. Give yourself permission to step away from the endless stream of noise demanding your attention, because the shift approaching requires more than observation. It requires presence. Complete presence. The kind of presence that allows you to recognize a meaningful moment while it is happening instead of months after it has already passed. As June 10th draws nearer, you may also notice something difficult to describe. It can feel like energy gathering beneath the surface of your life, a quiet pressure, a subtle anticipation, a sensation that something is moving into place even though you cannot yet see the full picture. You may find yourself feeling excited one moment and uncertain the next. Hope and hesitation may exist side by side. Part of you senses possibility. Another part of you questions what comes next. This internal tension is natural. You are not simply moving toward an event. You are moving toward a shift in direction, a moment where accumulated lessons, choices, and experiences begin forming a new trajectory. And whether you recognize it consciously or not, every chapter that brought you here has contributed to this point. Nothing has been wasted. Nothing has been random. Every challenge, every disappointment, every unexpected detour, every lesson you resisted, every lesson you embraced, all of it has been participating in a larger process whose purpose is only now becoming visible. Yet, as this peak approaches, another phenomenon often emerges. The old version of your life begins fighting for survival. This is something many people misunderstand completely. They assume that when transformation approaches, the path forward becomes obvious. In reality, the opposite often happens. The familiar suddenly becomes more attractive. Old habits regain their appeal. Former patterns feel strangely comfortable. Situations you thought you had moved beyond may reappear. People connected to previous chapters may unexpectedly return. At first glance, it can seem like nothing is changing, but beneath the surface, resistance is at work. Whenever you approach a new level of growth, the reality you are preparing to outgrow attempts to pull you back into itself. It reminds you of who you used to be. It offers familiarity as a substitute for evolution. It whispers that staying the same is easier than moving forward, and if you are not paying attention, you may mistake that pull for safety. You may convince yourself that returning to old patterns is the wiser choice. Yet somewhere within you, another awareness remains active, a knowing that refuses to disappear, a feeling that something larger is waiting beyond the comfort you have already outgrown. Recognizing this illusion is essential because it allows you to separate genuine guidance from the fear of change. You may also begin noticing changes in the way others respond to you. Some people may seem unusually drawn toward your energy. Others may become distant, resistant, or uncomfortable without any clear explanation. This can be confusing, especially when relationships that once felt predictable begin shifting unexpectedly. But this is often part of transformation. As your inner world changes, your external reality responds. The frequency you carry changes. Your priorities change. Your perspective changes. And not every person or circumstance is capable of evolving alongside you. This does not mean something is wrong. It simply means alignment is taking place. Not everything is meant to accompany you into the next chapter. Some things belong to the person you used to be. The deeper challenge waiting within this moment is not merely about awareness. It is about identity. At some point, you may find yourself standing in front of an opportunity, a decision, or a realization that asks you to become someone new, not someone different from your true self, someone closer to it, a version of yourself you have sensed for a long time but never fully embodied. And that transition can feel intimidating because every new identity requires the release of an old one. The familiar self wants to survive. He wants to remain recognizable. He wants to continue operating within established limits. Yet growth requires surrender. It requires allowing old definitions to fall away. The real question has never been whether you are capable of becoming that next version of yourself. You are. The real question is whether you are willing to release what no longer fits in order to step into what does. Because if this moment is ignored, life will not punish you. The consequence is far more subtle. It is stagnation, a quiet awareness that something remains unfinished, a lingering feeling that you were invited forward but chose not to move. Life will continue, responsibilities will continue, everything may appear normal, yet beneath the surface there will remain a sense of disconnection from your deeper power. Future opportunities may still arrive, but they will not carry the same precision, the same timing, or the same resonance as the ones standing before you now. And that is why awareness matters so deeply, because the greatest turning points are rarely lost through failure. They are usually lost through inattention, and what comes next depends entirely on whether you are prepared to recognize the moment when it finally arrives. Santia, Fale, Fushafmiu, Telute, Tijupathy, Igamafnin, Negamani Jahaka, Igamata, Deluyana Fata, Fight, Hamawe Nantaga Fav, Vagamet, Hu, Kamestera, Timukav, Sautafar, Tim, Hamuchbuv. Beyond the hesitation, beyond the uncertainty, and beyond the fear that has been trying to keep you anchored to what is familiar, there exists something far more significant than most people ever realize. It is not merely an opportunity. It is not simply a favorable outcome waiting somewhere in the future. It is a state of alignment that becomes available the instant you choose to honor what you already know deep within yourself. The moment you stop negotiating with your intuition and begin moving with it, something changes. The shift may not be immediately visible to those around you. The world outside may appear exactly the same for a time. The same responsibilities remain. The same environment surrounds you. The same people continue living their lives. Yet inside, an entirely different reality begins to emerge. There is a strange sense of relief that accompanies this decision, not because every answer suddenly appears, but because the internal conflict starts to dissolve. The exhausting battle between what you know and what you fear begins to lose its power. A deeper clarity rises to the surface. It is not loud. It does not demand attention. Instead, it feels like finally stepping into a current that has been waiting for you all along. You stop forcing. You stop resisting. You stop trying to control every outcome. And in that surrender, something remarkable happens. Your energy changes. Your perception changes. Your relationship with life changes. From that point forward, the path ahead begins responding differently. The doors that once seemed locked begin opening through unexpected circumstances. The people who need to appear arrive at precisely the right time. Information reaches you when you need it most. Events begin connecting in ways that feel too precise to dismiss as chance. The more aligned you become, the more these experiences seem to multiply. What once felt random begins revealing an underlying order. What once appeared disconnected starts forming a coherent pattern. This is why alignment is so powerful. Its greatest reward is not material success. Its greatest reward is connection. Connection to your own purpose. Connection to your inner guidance. Connection to your inner guidance. Connection to the deeper movement unfolding through your life. There is a feeling that emerges when you are truly moving in harmony with your path. It is difficult to explain to someone who has never experienced it, yet impossible to deny once it arrives. You feel supported, not because challenges disappear, not because every step becomes easy, but because something inside you recognizes that you are finally moving in the direction you were meant to go, and that realization changes everything. Yet, this is also where the challenge reaches its highest intensity, because the threshold approaching you now demands something that conflicts with nearly everything you've been taught to depend upon. Most people are conditioned to trust only what they can verify. They seek evidence before action. They demand certainty before commitment. They want guarantees before movement. From childhood onward, they are taught that visible proof must come first and trust must come second. But the moment approaching does not operate according to those rules. It belongs to a different level of awareness. You are being invited to trust before certainty arrives. You are being asked to move before every answer becomes available. You are being challenged to recognize something internally before it can be confirmed externally. And this is precisely where so many people become trapped. Their intuition speaks. Their inner knowing emerges. They feel the pull. They sense the direction. Yet they refuse to move because they cannot prove it. They wait. They analyze. They overthink. They search for confirmation that never arrives in the form they expected. And while they wait for certainty, the moment passes. The opportunity moves forward without them. The doorway closes. Not because they were unworthy, not because life rejected them, but because they insisted on receiving evidence before they were willing to trust themselves. The moment approaching June 10th asks something different of you. It asks whether you're willing to recognize the wisdom that exists beneath thought itself. There is a level of knowing that does not originate in logic. It exists deeper than reasoning, deeper than analysis, deeper than fear. You have experienced it before, perhaps only briefly. Perhaps during moments when you suddenly knew the answer before you could explain it. Moments when you sensed something was right, even though no evidence supported it. Moments when every logical argument pointed one direction while your spirit quietly pointed another. That knowing is real. It is subtle. It is often drowned out by noise, yet it remains one of the most powerful forms of guidance available to you. The challenge is learning to trust it, not blindly, not recklessly, but honestly, because there is a profound difference between blind faith and inner knowing. Blind faith ignores reality. Inner knowing perceives something deeper within it. Blind faith hopes. Inner knowing recognizes. Blind faith depends on wishes. Inner knowing emerges from awareness. And as this threshold approaches, that deeper awareness becomes increasingly important. Because whether you realize it or not, you are standing between two possible futures. At first glance, they may appear similar. Both contain familiar elements. Both contain challenges. Both contain opportunities. Yet the energy behind them is entirely different. One path continues the cycle you already know. It preserves the familiar patterns that have shaped your life until now. It allows you to remain within the boundaries you have already explored. Nothing dramatic changes. Nothing significant is required. You continue becoming more of what you already are. For many people, that path feels safe, comforting, predictable. But beneath that comfort exists a hidden cost, the cost of remaining unchanged, the cost of postponing growth, the cost of ignoring the deeper call that has been trying to reach you. The second path feels entirely different. It contains uncertainty. It asks more from you. It requires courage. It leads into territory you cannot fully map in advance. There are no guarantees, no detailed instructions, No promise that every step will be easy. Yet, despite the uncertainty, there is something about it that feels undeniably alive. Something about it resonates with the future version of yourself that has been quietly emerging beneath the surface. That path does not simply challenge you. It expands you. It develops capacities you do not yet realize you possess. It reveals strengths that remain hidden while you stay within familiar limits. And this is why June 10th matters so deeply, because it represents the meeting point between these two directions. Not merely a date, not merely a symbolic event, but a threshold of choice. A moment where the accumulated lessons of your past meet the possibilities of your future. A moment where awareness becomes action. A moment where potential begins transforming into reality. The choice itself may appear small. It may arrive disguised as a conversation, a decision, an opportunity, a realization, a simple response to a seemingly ordinary situation. Yet the most powerful turning points in life rarely announce themselves with dramatic spectacle. Their significance is often understood only in hindsight. Years later, people look back and identify a single choice that changed everything, a single moment that redirected their path, a single decision that seemed insignificant at the time but altered the course of everything that followed. That is the nature of thresholds. They appear ordinary while you are standing inside them. Only later do you realize you were standing at the intersection of two completely different futures. And now, after everything that has led you here, after every lesson, every challenge, every realization, every sign that has been quietly preparing you for this moment, only one question remains. When the choice finally appears, when the familiar asks you to stay, when the unknown invites you forward, when fear presents its arguments, when intuition presents its truth, when June 10th arrives and places the decision directly into your hands, which version of yourself will answer, and which path will you choose?